Welcome to Yielding the Floor, Reflections of Asian Pacific Americans in the nation's capital. My name is Ron Saracen. I'm a former member of Congress from Connecticut and the president of the United States Capitol Historical Society. It's my pleasure to introduce this highlight video of selections from the United States Capitol Historical Society's series of oral history interviews with Asian Pacific American members of Congress. To highlight the contributions of these dedicated public servants, the United States Capitol Historical Society has conducted oral history interviews with 5 current members, Senators Daniel Akaka and Daniel Inouye, and Representatives Michael Honda, Doris Matsui, and David Wu, and 1 former member and Cabinet Secretary Norman Mineta. The United States Capitol Historical Society is a private, nonprofit educational organization chartered by Congress to promote the history of the Capitol and the Congress through programs such as these interviews, in which members relive their memories of people, places, and events in the Capitol. It is our hope that these recollections will provide viewers with a deeper appreciation for the human dimension of representative government in this temple of liberty we know as the United States Capitol.
Before being in the chamber, I remember the night before seeing the dome lit up, and that was impressive. And thinking about being under the dome with the rest of the colleagues was something I was anticipating, but I didn't know how profound that feeling would have been. And while taking the oath, I just wish my father was here.
As you know, this was a special election, and I ran for the seat when my husband passed away. So for me, it was a little bit different than for most people, I believe. Bob was a member of the House for 26 years, and he loved the institution. And I had always been affiliated with it and understood it, but not really understanding what it really meant, until the day when I was sworn into office.
As you know, I spent a stint of time in medical school, and when I left, I knew that my parents, and particularly my dad, was not very happy about me leaving medical school before getting a degree. And we had gotten enough tickets to get my wife, my in-laws, and my parents into the gallery. And as I was raising my right hand and taking the oath of office, the thing that flew through my mind, I could sort of barely see my parents up in the gallery, and the thing that came through my mind was actually, I wonder if my dad's still upset about that medical school thing.
Well, I've spent some time in Washington before this. As you know, I went to law school, but I had never been on the floor of the chamber. And so it was an awesome experience for me to be among a multitude of giants and to have the Speaker of the House swear me in. It was a simple ceremony, but I'll never forget it.
Well, first of all, I was carrying my son, who's 3 years old, and when Carl Albert asked everybody to raise their right hand, so I'm holding Stuart in my left arm, and raising my right arm. And the only thing I could think of at the time was, what's a little kid like you from San Jose, California, doing in a place like this? And I was thinking, it can only happen in a country like the United States of America. It's just hard to imagine that, let's say in 1942, being evacuated from your home, placed on trains under armed guard, transported off to camp, and here some 20-some years later, being able to be sworn in as a member of the Congress.
I would tell you that I saw the beginning of World War II, and I saw the end. And let me put it this way. On December 7th, about 7:30, 7:45 a.m. on a Sunday, I was in school at Kamehameha, which is on the hillside. And because of the noise that we're hearing, we looked out and saw Pearl Harbor being bombed. And I recall watching the Arizona being bombed and how it tilted and burned for days following that. And we didn't know what this was all about until a squadron of airplanes passed over us to bomb Kaneohe, which was on the other side of the island, and saw on the wing of the airplanes this red figure that was the sun, and all of a sudden recognized that these were Japanese planes. And that was the beginning of the war. And then I went into service and ended my service on Saipan and Tinian, and it was there that the atom bomb was flown out to bomb Japan. And when that occurred, Japan surrendered. So that's the end of the war. And while in the Marianas, we knew that we had the atom bomb, and that we knew that one day it was going to be flown out, but we didn't know when. But it did happen, and Japan surrendered. So I can say I saw the beginning and the end of World War II.
It's probably the main strand through all the things that I've done since I was a young adult, when I started to realize and understand the full impact of the camp experience and being the community being taken from their homes and relocated to camps, understanding that government sometimes will make mistakes, sometimes on purpose, and sometimes just because of the situation of circumstances like World War II. Those kinds of experiences have been energizing, and the key for me was turning that energy that was negative and anger into a positive one of participatory activities that would make me part of a solution rather than being part of a problem and being constantly angry. And that was the source of energy that I would draw from all the time.
I was born in an internment camp post in Arizona, and my parents actually met in camp and married in camp. And I was born at the end of World War II, so I was probably 4 months old when they were allowed to leave the camp. But my parents never really spoke about it. And, you know, we were encouraged to be all-American in essence. I grew up in a small town, very active in all the activities, ran for office and participated in everything. And so for me it was, they wanted the American dream for me. To a certain degree, in a sense because they didn't get theirs. And they also didn't want me to have any chip on my shoulder or any feeling that I had any burdens on me.
But I've only seen my dad cry 3 times. Once was on the 7th of December because he couldn't understand why the land of his birth was now attacking the land of his heart. The second time I saw him cry was on the 31st of May, 1942, when we were boarding the trains to leave San Jose to go off to camp. And the third time was 1956, when my mother passed away. But the impact was really on the adults, on my older sisters and my brother. For me as an 11-year-old kid, this was, oh boy, an overnight train ride, a long train ride. And once we got on those trains, there were armed guards at end of each car, so we couldn't move from car to car. But I was wearing my Cub Scout uniform and a baseball glove and baseball bat. And when I got on the train, the MPs confiscated the bat on the basis the bat could be used as a lethal weapon. But I was in my uniform because the families were all going to be confined to one car, and you couldn't move from car to car. So Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts were used as messengers between the cars.
There are certain things that haunt me, even to this day, and that is the realization that war can change a person's character and personality. That one might be content in saying, I'm a good person. Now, for example, 1 week before I got into the service, put on my uniform, I was a Sunday school teacher, and I sang in a choir. And my mother was a devout Methodist, Women's Christian Temperance Union. You know, they don't get any more devout than that. And the whole family was that way. And then after training and going overseas, I recall killing the first German. And the thing that haunts me is that I was jubilant. I was proud. And the fellows around me patted me on the back and said, terrific, Dad, terrific. Now, I just killed a human being. And to think that war can change a person so drastically has been with me all the time. So when it comes to going into war, I am very cautious here.
I feel that my service here has really been not Danakaka, but the people of Hawaii and the people of this great country of the United States, and that I'll do everything I can to help the people out, and that I believe has come from where I come from. I'm smilingly saying that that my ethnicity of being Hawaiian, people tell me, oh, you know, that brings out your personality and your your relationships with people. And the Chinese brings out the business in me. And and that combination works real well. And I would tell you, I think that it does. And I'm able to accomplish a lot. And with my ethnicity and where I come from, I still feel a strong drive to do the best I can to help people.
There isn't a job that's as comprehensive as this and as impactful as, even though I'm one of 534 people, it's really a privilege to be here. And the privilege is this, that all of us come from different backgrounds and history and experiences. And those of us who remember what we've learned, what we've realized, what we've lost in terms of language, culture, history, and things like that, if we remember those things and we think about policy, we can convert our private lives into public policy. And when we do that, then we've engaged other people who may have had the same background and experience. And to capture that makes public policy making more precise and, well, elegant.
I decided to run for public office because I believe that public decisions are very, very important. And I learned that through the history of my family, the immigrant experience, and my personal experience with that. History has many curves for us, but because John Kennedy won by the narrowest of margins, well, 3 months after he was sworn into office, he signed a little-known, little-remembered executive order which equalized the chances of coming to America. Before that, it was much easier to come to the U.S. from Europe and much harder from everywhere else. He equalized that opportunity. That was put into statute by Congress a few years later. But after he signed that executive order in, I believe, March or April of 1961, 6 months later, my sisters, my mom and I were on the airplane coming here to the United States. So that little-known executive order literally changed my life, and I can cite several other instances where public decisions dramatically affected me, my family, or many of the people around me. So I do my work every day with the conviction that it matters to somebody, whether they're in New York or Portland, Oregon, or New Delhi or Shanghai.
I remember when it became possible that I might be appointed to fill a vacancy on the city council in San Jose. And I was talking to my dad about it because I was in business with him. I was a partner of his in the insurance agency and brokerage business. And he said, you know, I always wanted all of you children to be active in the community, but I never expected anyone to be in political office. And he said in Japanese, there's an old adage about if you're in politics, you're going to be like the nail sticking out on a board. And he said, you know what happens to that nail? It always gets hammered. And I always think, Papa, you were so right about being hammered if you are in politics. But by the same token, I think the evacuation and internment was an example of where people should have stood out, be ready to be hammered on a constitutional issue of that nature. And so I think I encourage people to be like that nail sticking out on the board.
Well, I suppose it goes back to my mother, because my mother was an orphan at the age of 4. Her parents were plantation workers and they were gone. And at that moment, there was no social services in the territory of Hawaii. And so she was literally out on the streets. And along came a young Hawaiian couple, took her hand and took her home. That's the way they do it. Hanai adopted her. And she lived with them as a happy child for a year, and she never forgot that. And she always reminded me what a gentle people, compassionate people these Hawaiians are. But as a result, they have been exploited, taken advantage of. And so it says, you must do your best to protect them. And when I became a politician, Hawaiians were on the bottom of the social and economic and political ladder. And I did my best to see that they're provided with the basic necessities of life, education and health, over and above what we were providing.
Until I really assumed the role of Member of Congress, I really didn't appreciate what it really meant because, you know, I've been around it for so long, but focused on a lot of the other things that I was involved in. And Bob didn't discuss every single thing with me, obviously not. But we knew the same people. And yet, taking on the role was a lot different. So it's, for me, been an interesting experience. It is a different role. And I think it's, in a sense, putting everything together that I've ever done in my whole life and utilizing it. And I find it to be very fascinating. It's very important for a member of Congress to be connected to what's going on in a district, especially today, because things are moving so quickly. And especially when you think about in challenging times. We're in challenging times today. And things move much more quickly. And you really want to make sure that you are at least on par with your district, and sometimes trying to move a little bit ahead too.
I have learned one thing, that being in this job is probably the best job I've ever had because it provides me the greatest opportunity to be involved in almost every issue that one can think of that's important to our families, the individuals, to both domestically and internationally, and how to work with people and staff to extract information as quickly as possible, digest it, and then come up with a position based upon my values, my principles, my history. And I think that what I've learned in my observation is that you always need that dissent, the disagreements, because this country is so wide and varied that there's no way we can have consensus without listening to each other. And I think that's what people expect us to do.
I have two grandchildren, Anna, who is 4, and Robbie, who is a year. They're my touchstone to the future. And I want to ensure that what I do today will make their lives better. And that's not only their lives, but every Anna and Robbie in every neighborhood in this country. So I want my legacy to be that I left this place better off than when I came to this place.
I have a very clear notion of why I'm here in Washington. I serve the interests of 700,000 people plus, and all of their issues are important. But the two issues that spin my wheels, that drive my willingness to be 3,000 miles away from home and to pour so much energy into this are two. One is to see great research and education in the United States in general and in Oregon in particular. Great research and education. And the other is to strongly promote democracy and human rights and the rule of law, to protect it here in the United States, to promote it all around the world, but specifically with regard to China and the Far East.
This may sound foolish, but I just want people to know I tried my best.
I hope you have enjoyed watching this video. To see this video again or to view the complete interview of each of these members of Congress, please visit the United States Capitol Historical Society's website, www.uschs.org. You'll learn much more about these inspiring Americans and their public service to our nation.